Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
Yes, America's anchorman is away, and this is your undocumented anchorman, Mark Stein, honored to be here direct from Ice Station EIB in far northern New Hampshire. I snuck across the Canadian border about an hour ago. There's a new executive order prohibiting Rush Limbaugh's sinister foreign guest hosts from 6 designated territories, Yemen, Somalia, Waziristan, Balochistan, Dagestan, and Canada. But fortunately, the Ninth Circuit has stayed implementation of the order until 2:45 p.m. Eastern today. So I'll be here till then, and then Rachel Maddow will be here to close out the show for you. Rush is off at a charity golfing engagement today, but he will return for authentic, full-strength, all-American, American as apple pie excellence in broadcasting to take you through the end of the week, starting tomorrow. Oh, yeah, the Canadian... Well, Mr. Snerdley points out that the Canadian border is getting a little busy. Yeah, the Canadian border Guards Union. What do they call Her Majesty's immigration inspectors there? They change the name of the agency every couple of years, but I think it's the Canadian Border and Security Agency. And the union is complaining that they're all overwhelmed from people fleeing the Trump terror, that they can't actually process them now. If you go to whatever it is, I-87, the New York-Quebec border, you basically start in New York City, head straight north, through the Adirondacks. I think it's called the Adirondack Parkway or something, as it goes north of Albany. And you get to that border crossing, it's like backed up for hours. People fleeing the Trump terror to get into Canada, and the Canadian border people are like totally overwhelmed by it. But if you're coming the other way, like if you're an undocumented anchorman like me coming the other way, it's easy because they've got basically it's set up now. They've got 9 lanes for fleeing and they've got 1 line for entry, and basically that's unoccupied because the Trump terror is so renowned around the world that nobody wants to come here anymore. So you can just basically come straight through. So that's fine. Weather update. Here at Ice Station EIB, and I think through most of the northeast, we're apparently going to get 1 to 2 feet of snow today. I looked out the window this morning, and the white stuff was already coming down thick and fast, but it was just Paul Ryan upstairs shredding previous GOP Obamacare repeal promises. So it turned out to be nothing to worry about. Speaking of the Canadian border, happy Commonwealth Day. I don't know if that's observed down here, but I do see that in the United States, it's Happy National Napping Day. Happy National Napping Day. So if you find yourself falling into a catatonic state between now and 3 p.m. Eastern, you're just entering into the spirit of the day. There's no need to feel bad about it. Actually, I found myself celebrating National Napping Day a little earlier this year. Yesterday, around about this time, I was watching all those Sunday morning talk shows they have on all the big networks, and they're all going on. They're all stunned that this U.S. attorney in New York, have you heard of this guy, Preet Bharara? That he was fired. Trump fired the U.S. attorney, Preet Bharara, and Preet Bharara wouldn't take the call from the president, refused to take the call from the president, and he was fired. He was terminated. And they're all going on about this, and I strangely, as I'm watching this on Meet the Press and Face the Nation and Face the Press and Meet the Nation, all these other shows on Sunday morning, I found myself just going terribly sleepy. I could hardly stay awake. I thought, this is weird. National Napping Day doesn't usually hit this early. But strangely enough, the minute they start talking about U.S. attorneys being forced to resign, I was just going, so sleepy. So we will try, but a lot of holidays going on today. We'll try to get to them all. I said Happy Commonwealth Day in Canada and Jamaica and the Solomon Islands and New Zealand and places. And then Happy National Napping Day in the United States. And this may have the edge. You know, obviously, I'm a loyal subject of the Crown, so happy Commonwealth Day, and I try to be an assimilated immigrant, so a happy National Napping Day. But Japan is celebrating the Festival of the Steel Phallus. And the Hodari Festival in the city of Nagaoka is considered one of the country's biggest and best phallus festivals. On the second Sunday of March each year, women who have wed in the past 12 months don traditional Japanese bridal gowns and straddle a totemic steel phallus as it is carried through the streets. The gigantic 7-foot phallus is celebrated as an emblem of good fortune. By the way, don't say that if you're one of the little snowflakes listening from your safe space at Middlebury College or whatever. By the way, I understand that for many of you, a gigantic 7-foot phallus is not celebrated as an emblem of good fortune. If you see one coming, by all means, shelter in place until the danger of the gigantic 7-foot phallus has passed. I'm not recommending the 7-foot phallus to any endangered snowflakes who all at Middlebury College or anything else. Anyway, there is actually a serious point to be made about the Festival of the Steel Phallus in Japan, and I will try to get to that before the end of the show today. 1-800-282-2882 is the number. What? I'm not... Mr. Snerdley has said I can't leave him hanging like that. I'm not... It's too early in the show for those kind of cracks. I will get back to the Festival of the Steel Phallus in Japan, but wherever you are, we're all about the multiculturalism here. So happy Commonwealth Day to Canadians, happy National Napping Day to Americans, happy Festival of the Steel Phallus to any Japanese ladies who emigrated to America, and on this day in particular are pining for the great 7-foot steel phallus being towed through the streets while you straddle it on top. Yes, there is a price to be paid for leaving your ancestral home and seeking fortune in a new land. The Washington Post today, this is one of the greatest opening sentences I have read in the Washington Post in decades of having the misfortune to read that miserable rag. This is one of the greatest opening sentences ever. I'm sorry I slightly undermined it by getting the Japanese steel phallus in there, but that should not, because that's a hard act to follow. This should not distract from the great opening sentence in this Washington Post story by Damian Paletta. Give this guy a Pulitzer. Quote, opening sentence, quote, President Trump's budget proposal this week would shake the federal government to its core if enacted, culling back numerous programs and expediting a historic contraction of the federal workforce, unquote. Hallelujah! Praise the Lord! According to Damian Paletta of the Washington Post, and this thing should get a Pulitzer, except he doesn't actually know culling back. You don't say back with culling. Culling is... Yeah, I shouldn't have to do this. They've got like all these overpaid editors at the Washington Post. It should just say culling numerous programs. You cut back or you cull. You don't cull back. This guy has been to journalism school. You know, he should have known this from the age of 12. But he can't write. But be that as it may, it's a great opening sentence. President Trump's budget proposal this week would shake the federal government to its core if enacted. Expediting a historic contraction of the federal workforce. Who knew? It's going ahead. The federal government will be shaken to its core. Now you know why Trump... the Trump process for the transition and nominating all these nominees has gone more slowly, because there ain't going to be anything for them to do. He doesn't need to nominate new agency heads. There ain't going to be any agencies. The spending budget Trump is set to release Thursday will offer the clearest snapshot of his vision for the size and role of government. Aides say that the president sees a new Washington emerging from the budget process, one that prioritizes the military and homeland security, while slashing many other areas, including housing, foreign assistance, environmental programs, public broadcasting, and research. Well, it's a start. That's in the Washington Post, and I would love to to live long enough to see the federal government shaken to its core. I would love to live long enough to see an historic contraction of the federal workforce. As Mr. Paletta says, this would be the first time the government has executed cuts of this magnitude and all at once since the drawdown following World War II, economists and budget analysts said. It's important, but Trump is different. You don't enter politics at the stage of life that he did, when you haven't done it for your entire adult life and you've had a fabulous, successful life. You don't then go into politics just for it to be a dull postscript to your career. It can sometimes work out like that. It did for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger. And this is again why for Trump the stakes have just increased. Arnold Schwarzenegger was a flop as chief executive. The Terminator couldn't terminate nothing in California. He was a bust. And he was a total flop as host of The Apprentice compared to Trump. Trump was right on that. Trump got in that guy's head and killed his ratings. So Trump's already beaten Arnold by not being a flop host of The Apprentice, and he doesn't want to go down the Arnold hole and become a flop as chief executive too. And I certainly hope this is the case, because when all the, Greg's so sleepy, Trump's fired. Trump's asked for resignations of U.S. attorney. Greg's so sleepy. If this is true, that his budget proposal this week will shake the federal government to its core, I say hooray, because no entity so deserves to have its core so shaken as the big, bloated federal government. And all this stuff here, housing, foreign assistance, environmental programs, public broadcasting, and research. They say research as if it's like critical research, but it's not. It's all these things like how, what was that thing I mentioned? The Festival of the Steel Phallus? It's all like research on how, transgendered mice would react if they were exposed to the Festival of the Steel Phallus. And then, the University of whatever spends $1 billion researching that. If this is, as Mr. Paletta promises, the historic contraction of the federal workforce, then it is long overdue. We will take your calls. 1-800-282-2882. Mark Stein in for Rush on America's #1 radio show. Mark Stein in for Rush on the Excellence in Broadcasting Network. 1-800-282-2882 is the number to call. If you would like to join the show, and we would love to have you join the show. And in particular, if you're a liberal, I'm sick of using those words about. I don't want to use the word liberal about the left anymore, because it is whatever it isn't liberalism anymore. They're now actually attacking. Physically attacking their own at some of these insane campuses that people mortgage their homes to send their kids to. So I don't want to use that term liberal. But if you're a lefty, if you're part of the resistance, as they call it, the resistance to the new Trump terror, give me a call, 1-800-282-2882, because I love to hear from you. We're big and open-hearted here, and we like to embrace the other. We don't want to just stay in our safe space. So if you want to call up and discombobulate me with your theories about social justice, then do give me a call, 1-800-282-2882, because I would love to hear from you. And as I said, I don't want to talk about this stuff that isn't important, like this nonsense. I was on a Canadian TV show about a week and a half ago, and I was on a panel, and the folks were very nice, but they suffer from that thing that the media suffer from, which is that they think things that are of interest to them, they can sell to the masses, when the masses are entirely indifferent to them. The masses don't care about Tweet Barara, not Tweet. What's he called? Preet Barara, not Tweet Barara. I don't know. Does Preet tweet? I don't know. Anyway, Tweet Barara, who has been removed as the U.S. attorney, he wouldn't take a call from the President of the United States, who is the Chief Magistrate of the United States, who is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States. He wouldn't take a call from his boss because he, as a U.S. attorney, he's not allowed to talk to people in case a criminal investigation comes up. And he's evidently planning one. According to Elijah Cummings, he's investigating the president, so he can't talk to the president because he's going to indict him for some crime or whatever. This is a madness. It is not important. It's of no consequence. It's not real, except insofar as this is the case. That the left is making an industrial scale effort to delegitimize the presidency of Donald Trump in its first weeks. And that is an extremely dangerous thing to do. You know, we have this thing, which, don't get me wrong, there's many things I love about this country, but the 3-month transition between the election and the new guy taking over is not one of the things I like about it. As I mentioned during the transition. By the way, that was longer. 3 months. That was longer than my entire television career. It's amazing the things that can happen in a mere transition. So that's because most countries it's 2 days. You know, in Canada they have the election on Thursday and the new guy moves in on Monday or whatever it is. The old guy has the weekend to pack and get the hell out of there. And they keep going on about this phrase, you know, the peaceful transition of power. Everybody kept going on about the peaceful transition of power. America is uniquely blessed with the peaceful transition of power. Because we all know that every time they change prime ministers in Norway, it's a bloodbath, you know? The other guy is getting, like, thrown off the prime ministerial balcony and tossed to the mob who tear him apart, limb from limb. And that's how it works there. Or it's like if it's a monarchy, I'll tell you how bad this is. If it's a monarchy, like in Canada, it's a monarchy, and they so lack the peaceful transition of power there that the new Queen's predecessor is literally carried out by the handles. That's how bloody and violent it is up there. So they're all going on about this peaceful transition of power, peaceful transition of power. And obviously that's true in the sense that the left has not actually begun shooting the winners of the election yet. But what they are doing right now is extremely dangerous for the so-called peaceful transition of power. It's not yet violent. They're not yet using force to deny the results of the election, but they are in effect denying the reality of the election, which is that one side lost and the other side won. And when you have, quote, the peaceful transition of power, that's it. That's the swings and roundabouts of normal electoral politics. And sometimes it isn't actually just anything more than that the pendulum swings, that as you know, we had 8 years of Obama, and before that 8 years of Bush, and before that 8 years of Clinton, and before that 12 years of Reagan-Bush. And that 12 years was extremely unusual. Generally speaking, after 2 terms, the public sighs and wants to give the other guy a shot. They're the swings and roundabouts of normal electoral politics. And to do what the Democrats are doing, and to do it to the degree that in particular this U.S. attorney and the assistant attorney general whom Trump had to fire for basically refusing to defend his executive order. This is basically the subversion of representative government, and it's deeply damaging, and it will backfire on Democrats, because Democrats are basically saying, we want a one-party state. If we can't win, nobody can win. Yes, Rush is out at a charity golf event today. He's super generous with his time like that, and it's very good of him to do that. He will be back tomorrow, but I know how you're feeling. You're feeling, it's just another day I'm getting discombobulated by a sinister foreign guest host. I'll head it up to here with that. You don't have to have that kind of feeling any longer if you go to rushlimbaugh.com and you sign up for a Rush 24/7 membership. You can get Rush any time of the day or night you want. It means what it says, Rush 24/7. He's never away. There are never any golf tournaments. There's never any charitable engagements. He's like in your room 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They've got all the archives of getting on for like a third of a century now of excellence of broadcasting. You can see him in any known form. You can get him in print. We got transcriptions of the shows. You can get him in audio, the whole vault of excellent broadcasting, or you can get him in video with the old Didocam. And there's now a whole bunch of new Rush extras with the new Rush 24/7. And if you subscribe today, you will get a free 4 extra weeks of Rush 24/7. So it's not Rush 24/7 52. It's like Rush 24/7 56 for the same low price. All you got to do to sign up is go to rushlimbaugh.com and become a Rush 24/7 subscriber. I was talking about this, the peaceful transition of power, and actually it isn't getting that peaceful at certain places, particularly American college campuses, American universities, which are in an absolutely disgraceful state, and the American academy should actually be ashamed of itself. I mean, if it were a serious academy, if these were serious institutions of educational excellence, they would be ashamed of themselves. But they're now like everywhere. They're proliferating. Like I said the last time I was here, an institution of higher education is now like Payless Shoe Sauce or Taco Bell. If you miss one, there'll be one along in another 200 yards down the street. Burlington, Vermont, the population of that place, what is it? 100,000 people, I think it's something like that. It's got like 5 colleges. I may be wrong here because Bernie Sanders' wife actually drove one of them into the ground and closed it down. So that's not in business anymore. By the way, that's the greatest contribution that Bernie Sanders and his family has made to the United States, is putting an American college out of business. God bless you, Bernie. Thank your wife for me. What a terrific job. But anyway, they got Taco Bell, Payless Shoe Sauce, whatever it is, college. This is actually a college I've heard of, Middlebury College. And it made the news last week because Charles Murray, who's a libertarian, and he wrote the book The Bell Curve, and he wrote Coming Apart, he was invited to participate in a discussion and a lecture at Middlebury College, and the rampaging snowflakes, shut the thing down, very menacingly and very violently. Charles Murray. Now, just to be clear, Charles Murray is a libertarian. He's not a Trump supporter. He's one of these people who, he didn't vote Trump. He was snooty about Trump. He's libertarian, so he's not like, he's like begun to shift a little bit on immigration, but he was basically an open borders guy until 20 minutes ago. He's hot for gay marriage. He thinks that's the coolest thing going. And it's still not enough. So even if you're pro-gay marriage, you're anti-Trump, and you're semi-open borders, you can't speak at Middlebury College. And they shut the guy down very violently. Now, Middlebury College, that's not like the Payless Shoe Sauce College. I'd actually heard of that one. I was giving a speech in Manchester a few years ago, and at the end of it, I was like a little bleary and having a drink in the bar, and a couple of co-eds came up to me and said, hey, we're from Middlebury College. Would you like to come over and give a talk to us? And as I said, I was like woozy and on that post-speech high. So I said, sure. And I went over and I did a little speech at Middlebury College. That's about a decade ago. And I would bet I couldn't speak there now if what happened to Charles Murray is any indication. And as I said, Charles Murray isn't a Trump supporter. He's pro-gay marriage. He's semi-open borders. He's not a right-wing madman, as that term is understood. But because he's not in full ideological compliance with the left on everything, he can't be allowed to speak. And what was interesting to me was that the lady who invited him, a professor at Middlebury College, Alison Stanger, she's a professor of politics and economics, and she was there. She's a left-wing professor, but she thought that Charles Murray had some interesting things to say that the students of Middlebury might benefit from. So it was her intention to have a Q&A and a discussion with him. This is the sort of thing that used to be entirely normal at universities, that there'd be a fellow broadly of the right and a fellow broadly of the left, and they'd have a conversation and talk things out, and you'd be sitting in the audience and you could say, well, I thought the left-wing guy won this thing hands down. Or, actually, I thought the right-wing guy had a couple of good... You can't do that now. You can't do that now. And it turned violent. It turned violent. Listen to this quote. I feared for my life. Now, that's not Charles Murray, the so-called right-wing hater. That's the left-wing professor, Alison Stanger. In shutting down the event, they were so violent, they were swarmed by an angry mob of at least 20 rampaging snowflakes, some of whom grabbed Professor Stanger's hair, another person shoved her, they damaged muscles, tendons, and fascia in her neck. Fascia, by the way, is nothing to do with fascist. Well, it is actually. It's the same root, but it's a medical term, not a political term. She had to go to hospital. She's a left-wing professor, and her own left-wing students put her in the hospital. Now, update on this. That was on March the 2nd. A few days later, the husband of this left-wing professor, who is called Professor Michael Krauss, he's the Frederick C. Dirks Professor of Political Science. By the way, he's a man who fled the communists after the uprising in Czechoslovakia in 1968. 49 years ago. 49 years ago, it was the Soviets sending troops into the streets of Czechoslovakia. This guy fled. And 49 years later, in rural Vermont, he has rampaging snowflakes behaving exactly the same way as the totalitarian thugs he fled in 1968. Anyway, this is the left-wing professor's husband who says, I'm just writing to let you know that she's now had to go back to the Porter Hospital emergency room yesterday, where she's diagnosed with a concussion. As a result, she had to cancel her class and office hours today. She hopes to be able to respond properly when she is physically able to do so. This is the state of the American Academy in the year 2017. The left-wing snowflakes are beating up their own left-wing professors. They're putting them in the hospital and then forcing them to return to the hospital to get diagnosed with a concussion days later. And so it doesn't matter. This is, and I would be this is why I would like to hear from people on the left today. Because we're told all the time, during the Bush years, you drove around with bumper stickers saying, Bush scares me, right? Well, of course, you know, that's the first sign you're not really scared. Because I can tell you, nobody drives around in North Korea with a bumper sticker saying, Kim Jong-un scares me. If you were scared, you wouldn't be driving around advertising how scared you are with your stupid bumper sticker. But you from Bush scares me, and I say, oh, Trump scares me. All the racists scares me. The transphobes scare me. The Islamophobes scare me. The fascists, like this lady who berated Sean Spicer in an Apple store over the weekend, saying, how does it feel to be a fascist? How does it feel to be a criminal? How does it feel... All the fascists scare me, the criminals scare me, the Trumpists scare me, the haters scare me, the fascists scare me. Professor Alison Stanger had to go to the hospital because her own left-wing students scare her. The weaselly, squishy, equivocating, cowardly, jelly-spine nothings who run Middlebury College, they're not scared of Trump. They're not scared of racists. They're not scared of fascists. They're scared of their own left-wing students. There's an Australian case I mentioned at my website today. An Australian cartoonist, broadly of a conservative disposition, died. A left-wing cartoonist in The Guardian wrote something nice about him. Immediately, the left-wing enforcers piled on and said, you can't say he was a lovely man. He was a racist. He was a hater. The Guardian cartoonist deleted his tweet and then issued new tweets saying he agreed. The guy he described as a lovely bloke 2 minutes ago, he was now a hater. The left, whenever they tell you they're scared of Bush, they're scared of Trump, they're scared of any of these right-wing guys. No, they're not. They're scared of their own. And I would like to hear from you today, 1-800-282-2882. Because this is beyond policy disputes. This has nothing to do with what you think Obamacare should be or what stupid bathroom Caitlyn Jenner should be using. This is about something more basic than that. Do you want to belong to a team that literally beats you up and puts you in hospital if you just have one slight point of momentarily wandering off the reservation? Do you want to stay on the team that beats you up if you just dissent on one little eensy-weensy point? 1-800-282-2882. Mark Stein for Rush will take your calls straight ahead. Mark Stein in for Rush. Just to clarify, I said a couple of minutes ago that in North Korea, unlike America, where people drive around with Bush scares me, Trump scares me, in North Korea, no one drives around with a bumper sticker saying Kim Jong-un scares me. But that's because Kim Jong-un has the car. I just wanted to clarify that. Let us go to Bob in Middleburg, Florida. Bob, you're live on the Rush Limbaugh Show. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Mark, for taking the call, and you do a great job for filling in. Can you hear me?
Thanks. Yeah, I can. Thanks a lot, Bob. I was just stunned by the compliment.
Your previous essay just almost preempted me because I was going to say, I remember when the leaders of both parties, although they disagreed with each other, leaders in Congress, would get together, make deals. What do you have to have? What do I have to have? Find a middle ground, consult with the president, and get something done and move it forward. Neither of the parties have done that. They are now engaged in internecine warfare and trying to destroy each other. The other aspect of this is that once upon Thomas Jefferson was asked if he wasn't concerned about the radicalism of the new parties emerging, I think the Whigs and the Federalists.
Right.
He said, yes. He says, but someday the people will take it back.
Right.
And I think that has just transpired to the distaste of both parties. And finally, I've never heard of a politician, man or woman, who fulfilled each and every campaign promise to the letter of the law. And that's all.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But that's true. Not everything can be fulfilled, and it's why people should have priorities. Just to go back to your first point, Bob, and I'll just disagree with you slightly on this. It's not always about finding middle ground, because the middle ground can actually be pretty mushy and boggy, and you can sink into it. Or what happens in Washington when they say, well, what do you want and what do I want? You just get some big porculus, as Rush described it a few years ago, in which the bill has something for Democrats and something for Republicans, and what both of them get are actually corrupt stinkers that are bad for the American people. But I will say this, that if you're in politics, you're meant to be in the persuasion business. You're meant to be making an argument. And you're meant to be trying, you have 100 people who support you, and you want to try and make 107 people support you. Or in electoral terms, you've got, 49% of people support you, and you'd like to make it 51%, so you win the election. And I had a thrill. I was on stage in Toronto with Nigel Farage, the UKIP leader, last year, and we were debating the refugee thing in Europe. With a couple of big-time hotshot lefties. And it was overwhelmingly against us. They polled the audience when we came in. It was like almost 80% against us. They were all pro-refugees. They were upscale Toronto liberals. And we looked at each other and we knew we had our work cut out, and we changed a lot of their minds, and we won that debate. We swung, I think, the largest number of votes that they'd had in the history of that debate. The moderator was stunned when he announced the final results. And what that taught me is that is actually what politics is about. It's about persuasion. It's about persuasion. You start off with your base and you increase your base and you add to it. And it doesn't always mean moving to the middle ground, Bob. Often it just involves persuading other people that you have the better of the argument. And this is why this Middlebury College thing is disturbing. This idea of legalistic obstructionism, where you lose the election and you immediately try to subvert the president and his administration by refusing to resign, by going to court, by doing all this kind of trickery. What you're saying there is we don't want to win the debate. We want to cancel the debate. We want to ensure that the debate never takes place. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing it like these thugs are at Middlebury College, or whether you are doing it by simply trying to obstruct the incoming administration from within the bureaucracy, as so much of Washington seems to be doing. But what you're saying there is we give up. We can't possibly. We're not in the act of persuasion anymore. We can't win the argument, but we don't need to win the argument because we're going to cancel the argument. We're going to smash the debate. And if there happens to be one poor little left-wing professor who thinks that this is still a free country where you're entitled to debate your opposing number and have a vigorous back and forth with them, we're going to smash her face in and put her in the hospital until she learns. Until our own left-wing dissenters learn that they're not allowed to debate either. This isn't going anywhere good. And as much as I like what Bob was saying about how Party A and Party B need to get together, there's only one side that is doing this violent stuff. It's the left, and they're taking us nowhere good. Larry Riffle emails to ask, well, how do you think the Hillsdale community would receive a leftist speaker, perhaps Obama himself? The Hillsdale college students are the politest in America, Larry. They would receive any leftist guest politely and then respond to him politely. That's the difference. Yes, America's Anchorman is away today, and this is your undocumented Anchorman. Honored to be here. Great privilege for a foreigner to be able to sit behind the golden EIB microphone. I do not say that lightly. I don't buy into this Ninth Circuit thing that all 6.7 billion people on the planet who aren't U.S. citizens have the right just to swan across the border and guest host the Rush Limbaugh show. It is a privilege, if you are a non-American, to be invited within the borders of this great republic. We're coming to you direct from Ice Station EIB in far northern New Hampshire. Mr. Snerdley is down in New York, running things with Mike and checking. I gather he's sneaking off to catch a plane at the top of the next hour. So we're going to go crazy and just play my Cat album back to back in that hour. Once he's on the way to the airport, once he's in the cab on the way to the airport, and he doesn't know what's going on, we're going to go crazy. He's locked in the back seat. He'll be demanding that the driver turns around and heads back to headquarters, but they will not. The cab driver will not be able to hear him because he'll have the radio cranked up listening to my Cat album. Speaking, I don't just talk about my own fabulous contributions to popular music. I also talk about some of these run-of-the-mill guys. Barely got a career, actually. Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg has got. Do you know Snoop Dogg? I should change my name. Yes, Snoop Dogg. Yeah, I should change my name to Snoop Cat. Actually, I would have sold far more copies of my Cat album if I changed my name to Snoop Cat. Anyway, Yeah, I'm not going to wear the pink hat. No, I think it's silly. You know, I haven't had the rich, full life that you have had, Mr. Snerdley, but I don't think I've seen anything that looks like that pink hat, and I don't know. I have no idea what it's meant to. Maybe it just sort of sags a little when you've been marching up and down. Anyway, enough of that. I'm not interested in the pink hat. I'm not going to go there. Snoop Dogg. I preferred him when he was Snoop Doggy Dogg. So when I do change my name, I'm going to be Snoop Catty Cat. Snoop Dogg is seen shooting a clown dressed as President Trump with a toy gun in a new music video. This is a story from The Hill. The track, it's part of the remix of Lavender. And the track, which focuses on police brutality, shows a world inhabited by clowns. Snoop Dogg says this is the final call before pointing a gun to the head of a cigarette-puffing clown dressed as Trump. After pulling the trigger, a bang flag then shoots out from the music star's gun. This is what the world has come to now. Snoop Dogg is less butch than rampaging snowflakes at Middlebury College. When they beat up their left-wing professors, they don't throw a punch and then a bubble comes out like on the old Batman show saying pow. They don't pull a gun with a little flag on it saying bang. They actually put their left-wing professor, in the hospital. And so Snoop Dogg, Mr. Hardcore Rapper, he's like a bigger sissy than some 8th year Middlebury College gender studies student. That's how crazy the world is. Your big butch gangster rapper is less gangster than rampaging snowflakes at a college in rural Vermont. That's how insane the world is. And he talks a good game. I was trying to find, this is from The Hill, and I was trying to find a quote from Snoop Dogg, or Snoop Doggy Dogg, as I like to think of him still, that I could read out, but it's actually quite hard. But this is what he says, actually. This is why he made his music video shooting Trump. Quote, the ban that this mother blanker tried to put up, him winning the presidency, police being able to kill mother blankers and get away with it, police being in jail, people being in jail for weed for 20, 30 years, and mother blankers that's not black on the streets making money off of it. But if you got colour or ethnicity connected to your name, you've been wrongfully accused or locked up for it. And then you watching people not of colour position themselves to get millions and billions off of it. It's a lot of clown blank going on, that we could just sit and talk on the phone all day about it, but it's a few issues that we really wanted to look into. And so that's why he shot a Trump clown in his new video, and he pulls out this gun, and he shoots the Trump clown, and a little flag comes out that says bang. And as I said, that's the world we're in now, where gangster rappers are less dangerous than rampaging 99.99999% Caucasian snowflakes at a rural college in Vermont, who at Middlebury actually put their real professor in hospital, requiring a trip to the emergency room and requiring another trip to the emergency room a few days later. That's the world we're living in. Todd Starnes will be joining us. You've seen Todd Starnes on Fox News, and he will be joining us at the bottom of the hour to talk about his new book, The Deplorables Guide to Making America Great Again. There was a tweet over the weekend that I wanted to talk about, because it got some controversy from people on left and right, by Steve King, who represents Iowa's 4th District, Congressman King. And he issued a broadly supportive tweet in response to Geert Wilders, the Dutch politician who's anti-Islam. I don't think that's unfair to say. Geert Wilders, the Dutch politician who's leading or tied, according to which polls you follow, in the Dutch elections, which are on Wednesday. And Steve King praised, retweeted a tweet from Geert Wilders. Now, by the way, they've got problems with Islamic immigration in the Netherlands. In Rotterdam, the big port city in the Netherlands, they had a a big ton of people demonstrating there, all shouting Allahu Akbar in the street. Now, in the United States, if you hear Allahu Akbar, your instinct is to dive under the table, because generally speaking, they're going to be the last two words you ever hear. But it's hard to do that when they're actually all around you, all shouting Allahu Akbar. So they have some issues with diversity and vibrancy and multiculturalism there. And Steve King sent out a tweet saying, "We can't restore our civilization with somebody else's babies," and praising Geert Wilders, in effect. And he got hit by people from left and right saying he shouldn't be saying that. Ross Douthat, who's the token conservative, or Ross Douthat, the token conservative at the New York Times, so-called, he basically said, why is Steve King conflating the immigration situation in Europe, where it's mostly Muslims, obviously, with the immigration situation in the United States, where it's mostly Hispanics? Well, let me conflate it a little further, because he's actually making a point. And I'll bring it back to the Festival of the Steel Phallus in Japan, which I promised I'd get back to, because Mr. Snerdley said, "Don't leave me hanging there," as he rather oddly put it. The Festival of the Steel Phallus in the streets of Japan. Japan has no immigration, so it has declining birth rates. Adult diapers outsell baby diapers in Japan. The toy manufacturers like Tomy now make toys for grandparents that know a few simple phrases. So they'll be the grandchildren you never have. The society is aging and dying, and it's visible. Maternity wards closed down, and they're all trying to develop robots with soft skin, so they're not all metallic hands, that can turn down your bed in the old folks' home, because they don't have enough young people to man the old folks' home. This is real. It's the biggest story of our time. The nations that built the modern world, the nations that run the modern world, the economically dynamic cultures of the world, have stopped having babies for the most part. And Japan, you see it in its purest form, because they don't have any immigration. They don't want any immigration. That's one reason they don't have Muslim terrorism, for example, because they don't have Muslims. They basically have, and it's nothing to do with Muslims, they don't want Canadians. They don't want anybody. They're happy to just be the Japanese. And if that means they die as Japan, then they will die as Japan. In Europe, it's different. They imported Muslims to be the children they couldn't be bothered having themselves, and in large parts of the United States, since the 1965 Immigration Act, America, again, has chosen essentially to open its borders to bring in the children that Americans, for the most part, couldn't be bothered having themselves. And that's what you see. That's what Rush was talking about the other day when he was going on about Jorge Ramos, talking about those remarks he made about it's not their country, it's our country. What did he mean by that? And Ramos tried to weasel out of what appeared to be a sort of oddly racist and conquistadorial attitude by saying that, in fact, it's Trump voters want to go back to old white America, not post-1965 America and all the rest of it. What Steve King is saying is that we've heard that the argument about immigration is always, we need immigrants to come and do the jobs Americans won't do. That's a structural defect in society. And all immigration, mass immigration, can do is buy you time on that. And mass immigration, and the more you use mass immigration as the all-purpose fix for whatever is the problem, the more you will set in motion absolutely transformative effects, which they now see in the southwest of the United States. You now see in Rotterdam, where in my mother was Belgian. One of her best friends was in Rotterdam, and when in the days when my mum was a little girl and she went to Rotterdam, it was an homogenous, ethnically Dutch town. They didn't even particularly care for Belgians, like my mother. The idea that that there would be people in the street cheering Allahu Akbar, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them all around, in the streets of Rotterdam, would have astonished my mother. So a dependence on mass immigration becomes transformative. It won't save your society. It will only transform your society into something other. And Steve King is entitled to point that out, because a lot of people quite like the way their countries are, and they don't want them to change just because the political class has decided they'd like it to change. It doesn't matter what the reason for the change is. I understand that if you're a wealthy Democrat like Nancy Pelosi, it's a bore to have to mow your own lawn. And it's a lot easier to get somebody else to do it. And if you look, you know, if you went to California, Nancy Pelosi, San Francisco 50 years ago, they would have been black people mowing her lawn. Then since the civil rights movement, that's all become a bit problematic. So better to bring in cheap labor from Latin America to mow your lawn. But either way, Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to mow her lawn. But if you're not in the class that hires people to mow your lawn, if you actually are happy to mow your own lawn, then the transformative effects of immigration eventually become an issue. And I'll mention one other thing on this. Trump, it's like, can you believe this? He's put a list of 6 countries that he thinks they shouldn't be allowed to emigrate to the United States without undergoing extreme vetting. Oh, what a racist, what a hater, hater. In Europe, they've just done a poll. I think it was Chatham House, was it? The Royal Institute of International Affairs, big time, one of the biggest think tanks in the world, just did a poll there that showed 10 European countries, 8 of them, a majority want 0 Muslim immigrants. They want Trump's Muslim ban. They actually want it. They don't want it to be pretending to be just targeting a few unpleasant people in Yemen and Somalia. They want 0 Muslims emigrating to their country. That's 8 out of 10 Western European nations. And of the 2 that don't, one of them is the United Kingdom, which was 47%. The other 2, a plurality. In other words, if it had been a multiple choice referendum, the no Muslims whatsoever would also side of one. So in other words, we have 10 European countries voting in favour of a ban. 0 Muslim. Even I'm not in favour of 0 Muslims. I think if, for example, if you're some poor guy in Kandahar who made the mistake of helping the America and the NATO guys when the Taliban were overthrown, and now the Taliban are coming back to town, and you're worried you're going to wind up like the South Vietnamese. You're going to be in a re-education camp, or you're going to be the third skull on the left in a mountain of skulls. I think the translator should be let in. I don't want a 0 total 100% Muslim ban, but 10 European countries, the people are in favour of it. And you can come up with you can say, well, they just don't know what's good for them. We do. We're the political class. We jet around and we all get together at Davos and we all decide what's good for all these little people far down below that we know better than. Well, look, you can call that system whatever you want. But it isn't democracy, it isn't representative government, it isn't Republican government, it is not self-government. And when you have a situation where the elite think one thing and the people they govern think something entirely different, that cannot hold. That will resolve itself one way or the other. And it's people having the vapours and having a hissy fit because of an innocuous remark like Congressman King's observation that you can't restore your own country by importing people to have the babies you can't be bothered having yourself. When people throw big queenie fits over an innocuous and actually quite trenchant observation like that, all you do is actually tell people you can't even mention this subject, and you drive it into the shadows. You drive it further and further away, so that by the time they do express an opinion of it, they're like those guys over in Europe. They want a 100% Muslim ban, because you wouldn't even let them talk about a ban on Al-Shabaab members from Somalia. You wouldn't even let them talk about a ban on Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula members from Yemen. That's racist, to say, oh, we shouldn't be letting the Al-Qaeda guy in. We shouldn't be letting the Al-Shabaab guy in. What, are you a racist? Are you a hater? So instead, they vote like they voted in those 10 European countries for a 100% Muslim ban. Congratulations, Steve King. This is the kind of debate free societies are entitled to have, and if you're saying, oh, racist, all you're going to do is wind up with poll results like those poll results they have over in Europe, where the people are going to turn to far more extreme answers because you wouldn't let them even debate any of the moderate answers. Mark Stein for Rush, more straight ahead. Hey, Barbara, in Beaufort, South Carolina. You're up next on the Rush Limbaugh Show. What's on your mind, Barbara?
Hello, Mark. First, I wanted to point out real quickly that you missed one of the grammatical errors in the Washington Post story. You said ahistoric instead of an historic.
Yeah, I always say an historic occasion, just as like when I go and do Rush from New York, I always stay in an hotel, but people tend to think that's kind of affected by today's Americans, so I always feel a bit of a like snooty foreigner when I do that. And what was the other word you wanted to mention?
The other thing has to do with fake news stories, Washington, D.C., the Post. There's a museum there that you may have been to called the Newseum.
Yeah. Right.
And I was thinking it'd be really awesome if they had an interactive CNN versus InfoWars fake news challenge. I will take that up on that. My kid on the 8th grade school trip to Washington said he had never seen a more stupidly named museum than the Newseum, the so-called Newseum that they have, Barbara, and he could never take it seriously just on the basis of the name. But I will, when I go revisit Washington and I take him in there, we will try and propose that to them, because it would certainly liven up a dead, self-flattering, inert experience, which is what that museum is. The Rush Limbaugh Show, lots more still to come. Yeah, great to be with you. Rush is off at a charity golf tournament today, but he will return tomorrow to take you through the end of the week with authentic, full-strength, all-American excellence in broadcasting, except no substitutes. It's great to be joined on America's #1 radio show by Todd Starnes from our friends over at Fox News. And Todd is the author of The Deplorables Guide to Making America Great Again. Good to have you with us, Todd.
Mark, I want to say mega dittos from the far right side of the Fox News corner of the world.
That's true. You're pretty solid on most of these issues.
I'm pretty deplorable.
Yeah, that's true. You've actually though been, because the thing about this whole deplorables thing that got going thanks to Hillary Clinton, you decided to actually run with it and make it a kind of a manifesto in this new book.
I did. I wanted to give conservatives and patriots across the fruited plain a handbook that they could use to make America great again in their local towns and communities. And it really has been sort of a rallying cry for the gun-toting Bible clingers of America to stand together and to understand that when we do put aside our differences and we do stand together, we can facilitate change in this country. And I believe that's what happened on Election Day.
Yeah, you said in towns and communities. So you think this is, you don't have to be like a big shot in Washington for this. You can actually start from the ground up, as it were.
That's right, Mark. As a matter of fact, I believe that's where we have to start this movement. We really can't rely on what's happening in Washington. I think we've certainly seen that with the establishment Republicans. You know, they campaign as conservatives, but they govern as anything but conservatives. So it's important for us to take a stand in our local towns and communities. And I illustrate in the book, after every chapter, we have marching orders, very practical things that moms and dads and grandparents, college kids, high school kids can do that don't cost, doesn't cost a lot of money, but they can take a stand in their neighborhoods and support true American values.
Give us a couple of examples of that, because I'll say this. One of the things that I loved when I first came to this country, if you compare it with like the European Union, which like issues regulations on the curvature of bananas that have to apply to the entire planet. What I loved about America when I first came here is that town to town to town, people could reach their own decisions on how they wish to be governed at the local level, how they wanted things to operate at the local level. And Obama and the left seem to want to do things on a planetary wide. They're all about lowering the oceans, and which I don't feel I can make individually much contribution to. So what are the more practical things that you think people can actually do where they live?
Well, you know, Mark, I live among the indigenous liberal population in Brooklyn, and I truly felt to understand the American liberal, I needed to live in their natural habitat.
Right. Speaking as an anthropologist now.
My claim to fame was bringing a case of Rush Limbaugh's 2 of my tea to our block party a couple of summers ago.
Right.
That didn't go over very well.
Yeah, no, you had everyone, by the end of the evening you had everyone with you all the way, but you shook them off in Queens. Yeah, that's the way.
You know, it's interesting because I know in our neighborhood in Brooklyn, and I suspect it's this way in many other communities, public schools are being used as the engine to facilitate this massive cultural change. They really have become indoctrination centers for the left. And so one of the things I encourage people to do is get involved in their local public school system, make sure they're understanding what their kids are reading, what they're learning, especially in regards to American history.
Right.
I tell moms and dads that they ought to take personal responsibility for teaching their children about American history. Don't rely on the government-run schools to do that for them.
Right. You're absolutely right there. And people the Republicans, I think, generally haven't understood how effective the left has been at hollowing out all the local levers of control. People think, oh, well, you know, the local school board, it's like long, boring meetings. I don't want to have to waste time with that. But the left send like 3 or 4 activists along to those things and wind up controlling the entire agenda of the school district just because they understand that you can actually have incredible influence if you just if you start with people who are in kindergarten and first grade.
And that's what we're seeing happen. And I'll tell you something else, Mark. I believe that faith and freedom go hand in hand. And I believe that American church houses, the preachers of our great nation, have a responsibility to talk about these issues from the pulpit. And unfortunately, many churches have chosen not to do that because they don't want to cause offense or they don't want to come under attack. But I believe that we all have a role to play here. And I do believe that we are one nation under God, and that is why I believe that's why God has found favor on our nation, and He is blessing our great land.
Do you worry that some of these, whatever the phrase is, faith-based institutions are actually a bit faint-hearted in their faith? I mean, you have things like even Catholic universities, so-called Catholic universities, get a bit wobbly about sending out explicitly Christian Christmas cards, that somehow they go all a bit sheepish and fall silent about what ought to be their central purpose.
Absolutely. You know, we are called to be salt and light, but unfortunately many of these Christian institutions are on a salt-free diet. And I think that harms us, that hurts us. You know, especially in education, there's always a shift to the left. A progression. And so it's important that we have leaders in place that can ensure that does not happen. You know, I'm a member of the Southern Baptist Convention, and back in the 70s, we became the only major denomination to shift back to the right.
Right.
But that took a lot of effort and a lot of work, and people have to take a stand. So that's the message in this book: is that we've got to roll up our sleeves. You know, grab a lunch pail and get to work. We can't rely on our elected leaders to do this.
No, that's true, and it shouldn't be. It's not just about electing the great leader who will wave his wand and make America great again. If you're going to make America great again, you've got to be. It's not a spectator sport; it's a participation sport.
Well, you're absolutely right, Mark, and that's been the challenge. You know, Reagan brought mourning to America. And what happened? Conservatives, they went into hibernation. Before long, we had a guy saying, read my lips, no new taxes. And then we had a community organizer in the White House.
Right.
So I want to make sure that we don't end up there again. I mean, we came very close. Franklin Graham said we were at a moral tipping point. And I believe that God saw fit to give us a second chance to get this right.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I don't think people understand how consequential the November election was. If we were now at the beginning of an 8-year Hillary Clinton presidency, you wouldn't really want to think about what America would be looking like in the year 2024. As you know, there's a lot of difference about that on the right, and a lot of so-called conservatives were happy either to sit out the presidential vote or actually pull the lever for Hillary Clinton. Have you had any sense that the right is actually coming together post November 8th?
You know, I think it's a little hard to say right now, Mark, and I never really could understand the Never Trump crowd on that aspect, that the moral high ground was letting Hillary Clinton take office. That just made absolutely no sense to me. Donald Trump was not my first choice. He wasn't my second choice, but you know what? He was the last guy standing. And I really was very concerned about the future of the Supreme Court with the Hillary Clinton in the White House. And I think a good number of conservatives understood what had to be done to save the courts and, quite frankly, to save America. You know what? The Pew study, I believe it was last year, 40% of young millennials, 40% of millennials believe there should be limitations placed on free speech. Those are some scary statistics coming down the pike.
No, and they're serious, and they mean that, Todd. That's actually a serious point, and an important point, that there's a whole generation of so-called Americans now who actually think free speech is less important than having the correct attitudes on Islam or transgendered bathrooms or whatever. That's a very important point. Well, it's great that it's a practical guide, Todd. Todd's book is called The Deplorables Guide to Making America Great Again. Who's the publisher of the book, Todd?
The publisher is Charisma House, and it's available at every major bookstore in the country. You can also get it online at Amazon.
Yeah, that's good. You can be reading it in minutes if you like to do it on the old Kindle thing. And as Todd said, at the end of every chapter, he's got a little thing called marching orders. So this isn't just some highfalutin political science thesis. It's actually practical advice as to how you, in your towns and counties and school districts, can make America Great Again. Great to talk to you, Todd. The book is called The Deplorables Guide to Making America Great Again. Thank you, Todd Starnes, and we will be back in just a moment. Hey, Mark Stein in for Rush on America's #1 radio show. Let's go to Dave, calling us from the City of the Crosses in New Mexico.
Mark,
Dave, great to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Listen, in addressing the issue of the campus unrest, if you want to call it that, rioting, I noticed when I saw on TV UC Berkeley, the one thing that was conspicuous was there were no police there. And I'm sure that was the administration's backing them off. Don't get involved. But if we had a police force sanctioned by the administration that would go in and apprehend the people that were causing the rioting, you could interrogate them and find out where their source is. And as far as the lady in Middlebury, the professor that was beat up, she should sue the administration of the university for not protecting her, not providing security.
Yeah, and I would think that will be coming. I mean, there's gonna have to be some accounting for that. I'll back off what you were saying just a little bit, Dave, because I think the minute you need, and I say this as someone who has given speeches that have been alleged to be controversial, and I've seen this in many parts of the United States and in Canada. It happened to Ann Coulter. I think it was at Carleton University in Ottawa, where they arrange security. So they say, oh, you can hold this event, but you have to pay whatever it is, $2,000, $5,000 in security costs so that it's safe to hold this event. You want to bring Charles Murray, an academic who's written a book, a social scientist who's written a book on America coming apart, and you want to interview him, and okay, we'll agree to let you hold that event, but you have to pay $2,000 to $5,000 in security costs. That becomes a way of ensuring that it's too expensive to hold the event. That's the first thing, because that doesn't apply to the left-wing guys, because the right-wing students, there are not many of them, but the right-wing students, as we discussed, are generally, they don't smash your face in. So you can bring in the biggest, looniest, leftiest, insane guy, like this fellow at, I think it was Georgetown, who was saying that Muslim slave owners had the right to beat their slaves. Nobody complained he invaded their safe space. The guy posted it to Facebook. He was so pleased with the lecture, nobody raised a peep about it.
Right.
But when you have this, so they'll say, oh, it's $5,000 in security costs. And then what you have is the so-called security team will advise that it's unsafe to hold the event. So as happened to Ann Coulter at, I think it was Carlton in Ottawa, the event gets shut down for security reasons. And as a friend of mine always says about this, security concerns are the new shut up. In other words, these universities use security concerns, Dave, as an excuse not to hold the event. So they'll agree to hold it and then shut it down 10 minutes before it starts because of security concerns. In the end, there has to be a pushback against this, Dave, and it has to be this, that if you want to go to Thug Academy, if you want to go to university, you should be there to learn. You're not there to riot. You're not there to rampage. Frankly, the level of stupidity at these so-called institutions of higher education is staggering. People don't know enough, certainly not enough to make it worth taking out a six-figure sum for the privilege of going there. And that ought to be a bottom line, that if you don't want to hear what somebody has to say, you stay home and watch TV that night. You don't go to the event with the intent of smashing it to pieces. The minute you do that, the conversation is over. And regular these are when you look at them, these are all the usual little spindly, wispy-bearded snowflakes. They're not strapping butch guys. They're not even like these so-called 17-year-old young male Muslim refugees rampaging all over Sweden, terrorizing the women folk. They're certainly not as butch as that. They're just the usual wispy little, spindly, wispy-bearded, man-bun snowflakes. And all they have going for them is numbers and mass, so that in this case they could surround their left-wing lady professor and pull her hair and punch her and wind up sending her to the hospital. Because the wispy-bearded man-bun snowflakes are apparently good at beating up women. That's good. They can do that. So it's not a question of needing, if events at universities need to take place under a wall of police and security, then whatever that thing is, it is not a university. It is not a university. It is, and there has to be a pushback from the craven squishes of the administrative class. Do you want to go down? Do the administrators of these colleges want to go down in history as the people who drove historic institutions into the toilet because of their jelly-spined appeasement of moronic thugs? That's what it's about. And they're not, as I said, they didn't beat up any right-wing guy here. They put a left-wing woman in the hospital. The snowflakes put a left-wing woman in the hospital. And shame on Middlebury. Shame on the Middlebury College administrators who aren't man enough. Never mind, they're not even man enough to rise to the defense of one of their own female left-wing professors. Shame on you, you loser creeps. Mark Stein for Rush. More ahead. Mark Stein in for Rush. 1 to 2 feet of snow coming to afflict the northeast. I think it starts late tonight, so it's perfect timing for the Washington Post to say the world is getting warmer every year thanks to climate change. But where exactly most of that heat is going may be a surprise. A new study out Friday in the journal Science Advances suggests that since 1967, a staggering 337 zetajoules of energy, that's 337 followed by 21 zeros. So if you don't like $20 trillion in debt, just leave it a couple of years and it's going to be 20 zeta dollars in debt. So what's happened is that because the last 20 years there's been the predictions of the apocalypse have failed to come to pass. So instead they're now saying it's hiding in the ocean. Like Godzilla, all the heat has gone and it's hiding in the ocean. But like Godzilla, it's going to pop up out of the ocean and destroy the planet. You just wait. It will. It really will. Yes, America's Anchorman is away today, but he will return tomorrow. He's out at a charity golf tournament. He's super generous with his time like that. But one way to alleviate the stress and strain of a rushless day is to go to rushlimbaugh.com and become a subscriber to the Limbaugh letter. No fake news there. It's all the real deal. It comes straight from Rush. It's got Rush's commentaries, but it's also got Rush's interviews with leading thinkers, including in the new March issue, Salina Zito, a truth teller who got the Trump movement and the election right. And exactly right. And there's actually, there's a lot of people who make a pretty nice living in media who got the whole thing completely wrong. So I don't know why you pay attention to them, because at a certain point, someone in this line of work has to actually get it right in a basic sense. And if they didn't get it right, there's not really much. There are actually whole networks where they're like full of people who called the whole election wrong. It's amazing to me. But Salina Zito isn't one of them. Rush talks to her in the new Limbaugh letter. And if you want to get it, you can get it in whatever form you want. You can get it in print, because it's nice to get something that's through the mail that isn't just, Blue Cross Blue Shield cancelling your healthcare policy. It's nice to get something nice in the mail once in a while. You can get it in print or you can get it in digital form. All you got to do is go to rushlimbaugh.com and click on the button for the Limbaugh letter. Mark Stein coming to you from Ice Station EIB in far northern New Hampshire. If you're fleeing the country, as so many people are, they've got backlogs at the Canadian border. Her Majesty's immigration inspectors have been completely overwhelmed by people fleeing the Trump terror. So there may be a huge backlog at the border that starts quite early. So don't just sit there in line for days on end trying to flee to safety in the Great White North. We got a big sign on the border saying Last Rush Guest Host. It's on the highway, Last Rush Guest Host before the border. And you come in, swing by, say hello. We can actually probably even run you across the border through one of the old bootlegging routes up in what they call the Indian Stream Republic here in far northern New Hampshire. We can probably get you to safety in Canada without you having to even bother checking in with Canadian immigration. That's how obliging we are. Mark Stein in for Rush. The New York Times had a hilarious story over the weekend. What happens when you fight a deep state that doesn't exist? This is Trump, talking about the so-called deep state that is supposedly out to get him. The deep state. This is what they call all the spooks buried deep in the bureaucracy who are undermining the Trump administration. And this guy, Max Fisher, big shot guy at the New York Times, what happens when you fight a deep state that doesn't exist? So you got that. There's no such thing as the deep state. Pay no attention to the deep state behind the curtain. There isn't any such thing. And he says the Trump administration, in its fight against the deep state, could risk exacerbating the very problems it has pinned on shadowy bureaucratic forces, leaking internal conflict and the politicization of institutions like intelligence agencies. American institutions do not resemble the powerful deep states of countries like Egypt or Pakistan, experts say. Who are these experts? The New York Times doesn't say. I mean, what kind of guy won't go on all the New York Times is telling us that it's not as bad as Egypt or Pakistan. That's the standard the New York Times is using now, and the expert won't even put his name to that quote. Nor do individual leaks, a number of which have come from President Trump's own team, amount to a conspiracy. The diagnosis of a deep state, those experts say, has the problem backwards. So there's no such thing as a deep state. We've got unnamed experts who are assuring us there's no such thing as a deep state. And even if there were a deep state, it wouldn't be as bad as the deep state is in Egypt or Pakistan, where there's a real serious deep state. Say the unnamed experts that this guy can't even put a name to, who are assuring you that the deep state doesn't exist. The deep state doesn't exist any more than these unnamed experts exist. And the whole piece goes on like this. Mr. Trump has put institutions under enormous stress. He has attacked them publicly. He implied he would reject intelligence findings that cast his election in a poor light. That has forced civil servants into an impossible dilemma: acquiesce, allowing their institution to be sidelined, or mount a defense, for example, through leaks that counter Mr. Trump's accusations, or pressure him into restoring normal policymaker practices. So by what they mean by normal policymaker practices means forget all that voting stuff in November. It's business as usual, normal policymaker practices. It means regardless of how you vote, nothing changes, because the bureaucracy wants everything to be done within normal policymaker practices. But don't worry, no, all this talk of a deep state impervious to the wishes of the people is complete nonsense. Don't pay no attention to that. But the piece then goes on to say that these defensive acts have deepened perceptions in the Trump administration of a deep state that must be rooted out. Okay, so in other words, the more that this anonymous bureaucracy that isn't a deep state behaves like a deep state, the more that Trump insists there is a deep state, which in turn only drives the bureaucracy to behave like a deep state even more. So this is the New York Times at work. There's no such thing as what's the piece called again? What happens when you fight a deep state that doesn't exist? That's how they start off. Well, you run the risk of actually conjuring into existence a deep state that will then exact its own revenge on you for having dared to criticize it even though it doesn't exist. That's the New York Times. Pay no attention to this talk of a deep state. There's no deep state behind the curtain. The deep state doesn't exist. But if you keep saying it exists, then you'll risk creating one that will utterly destroy you. Thank you, New York Times. I can sleep much safer in my bed now. I honestly have no idea why people pay any attention to anything in U.S. newspapers, because they are more say what you like. Their thing is that the deep state in Pakistan is far worse than the deep state that doesn't exist in the United States. But I'll tell you one thing that isn't far worse in Pakistan: the newspapers. The newspapers in Pakistan are far less idiotic than the newspapers in the United States. I want to say one other thing while I'm here on this deep state thing. Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, has said that the Russian ambassador also met with Clinton people too. So he wasn't just meeting with all these Trump operatives who are all apparently KGB agents. They're all receiving their instructions from dead drops in parks in Washington, D.C. The Russians also met, the Russian ambassador also met with Clinton people. Because oddly enough, that's what diplomats are meant to do. You send diplomats to foreign countries in order that they can meet with influential persons in those countries. And so if the ambassador is just going to sit holed up in his embassy, basically watching TV all day long, there's no point to having an embassy, is there? It'd be a big waste of money. The point about sending an ambassador to a foreign country is that he meets people who live in that country. And this idea, oh, have you heard? It's outrageous. People close to Trump have met with the Russian ambassador. Really? The ambassadors used to be famous for giving garden parties. It was a big thing. I think the British ambassador in Paris, it's a big thing in the Paris social scene to get an invitation to the garden party, summer garden party at the British embassy in Paris. But that's suspicious. What's he doing with that? Why is this ambassador meeting with people who are citizens of the country he's ambassador to? Again, it's National Napping Day in the United States. It's National Napping Day. And this Russian thing is, oh, God, I'm going so sick, I can hardly, oh, gosh, Trump met with the Russian ambassador, oh, going so sleepy, I can't. I want to make a bigger point about Russia. It's part of Western civilization. It's not a very effective part of Western civilization, but it actually has made an immense contribution to our civilization. Tchaikovsky, Rimsky-Korsakov, Rachmaninoff, Pushkin, Chekhov, Gogol, Google Gogol. If you don't know who Gogol is, Google Gogol. He wrote my all-time favorite short story about a guy who's saving up for a new overcoat. Doesn't sound great when you put it like that. It's a brilliant story. These are guys who have made an immense contribution. Russian culture is Western culture. It is part of our civilizational inheritance. It's not North Korea. It's not Saddam Hussein's Iraq. The Russian state has had a disastrous last 100 years. It has launched from, we're coming up to the 100th anniversary of the communist revolution a little later this year. It has lurched from one disaster to another in this last century. But Russia is part of our civilizational inheritance. And the idea that the left, after largely sitting out the Cold War when they weren't actively taking the wrong side in the Cold War, is now suddenly shocked to find that there are Russians operating in the United States and people are meeting with them, is completely preposterous. What we ought to be doing is actually trying to remind Russians of that better side of themselves, of the Tchaikovsky, Chekhov, Pushkin, Gogol. Like I said, Google if you don't know who he is. That side of them, and remind them that they are part of the citadels of civilization too. They're run by gangsters, but so what? Middlebury College is run by appeasers of gangsters. Middlebury College is attended by gangsters. There's an awful lot of gangsters everywhere. We should, this cheap demonization of Russia, which is actually going to provoke some serious problems if the Democrats don't ease up on it, because Putin doesn't like it. But it's also wrong. As I said, they are part of the house of civilization. They are one of the pillars of our civilization, and they have made contributions to that. And our relations with Russia should be predicated on the basis of winning them back to their better angels. And no, they have not had the political development that has gone on in the rest of the civilized world. They are a century or more behind the rest of Western civilization as far as that is concerned, but they are part, when you scrape away communism, what remains and endures underneath is part of the House of the West. Mark Stein for Rush. We'll take your calls straight ahead. Mark Stein in for Rush on America's #1 radio show. Let's go to Sherry in Worcester, Massachusetts. Sherry, you're live on the Rush Limbaugh show. Great to have you with us.
Thank you, Mark. This most recent incident of rioting on college campuses by the wild students, and this one ended up putting someone in the hospital as opposed to just getting fired or humiliated or demoted. Right. And I'm thinking, see, these people these administrators have encouraged this sort of thing on their college campi for years, and now they're to the point of where they have a bunch of wild pit bulls that even they can't control. And it seems to me that the concept of being civilized, law and order, having some sort of semblance of manners and an allowance for other people to have different points of view is really biting them all in the behind, not to mention the rest of us.
Well, I don't think, I think it's deliberate, actually, Sherry, because I don't think you could have done this to the American universities and to a less extent others in the Western world, but actually America leads the arena in the craziness of the campus. And I think it's...
But who's doing that? Who's allowing the craziness?
Well, because I think, for example, Todd Starnes mentioned last hour that these polls that show that today's generation place no value of freedom of speech, for example. They're not interested in free speech. What matters is that on certain topics, on Islam, on climate change, on same-sex marriage, on abortion, on transgendered bathrooms, the list gets longer and longer. They're not subjects on which you can have different positions. There's a correct position, and any other position is wrong. And
exactly.
so there's no rational thinking. If you asked somebody, if you asked one of these rampaging snowflakes at Middlebury College to actually mount an argument against Charles Murray, they can't do it. They've had the most expensive education in human history. There actually isn't anything to compare to this, where people pay six-figure sums to learn nothing else other than the correct social attitudes. Which is what they're paying for. They're basically taking on a huge six-figure debt in order to strike the correct pose. Oh, I'm concerned about climate change. Oh, I think Islam is a religion of peace. Oh, I'm in favor of being able to use the bathroom of the gender identity you identify with genderly. Striking attitudes. So they can't argue. So when someone stands up like Charles Murray, who's a polite, soft-spoken man, and he starts talking, and you understand that he's not where you're meant to be, they no longer have the capacity actually to mount an argument against him. And so all they can do is shut him down. I mean, we are basically dealing with people who are de-evolutionizing. These are not institutes of learning. They do not inculcate rational thinking. They say no. On certain privileged topics, there's a correct position, and don't you even think about entertaining any of the alternative positions, because that way you are an apostate from the new diversity cult religion. And that's what we see at Middlebury College and other, which is not a joke institution, or it didn't used to be a total joke. It is now. They've rendered it a joke. But basically, you can't expect people to just say, well, you don't have to think anymore. You don't have to think. Okay, if I don't have to think, what do I have to do? Well, you just have to stand there with your hand on your hip, striking an attitude. You're in favor of saving the planet. You're in favor of transgender rights. You're in favor of a woman's right to choose. Okay, well, I've been standing here striking an attitude for an hour, and it's pretty boring. Well, no, that's all you have to do. You don't have to think. You don't have to think. You just have to strike an attitude. And then they invite someone who doesn't strike an attitude, someone who actually is in the business of argument and debate. And you don't know what that's about. But you're pretty bored with just striking an attitude. Isn't it more fun just to smash somebody's face in? Even if the only face you've got to smash in is that of a left-wing female professor who actually agrees with you. That's how crazy it is, Sherry. The left is now, when you're beating up a female professor, you're the fascist. You're the fascist. Look at the footage. Look at the pictures. Look at the scenes from what's happening at Middlebury College. Read the descriptions of what's happening at Middlebury College. When you're beating up a middle-aged female professor and sending her to the hospital, you're the fascist. Thanks for your call, Sherry. We'll take more straight ahead. Yes, Rush is away. He's at a charity golf event today, but he will be back tomorrow. Authentic, full-strength, all-American excellence in broadcasting. You need not be discombobulated by any sinister foreign guest hosts any further. There's a cure for that. There's a cure for that, like some of these guest hosts are okay, the other guest hosts, it's all a bit hit and miss, isn't it? Well, you don't have to worry about that if you go to rushlimbaugh.com and you become a Rush 24/7 subscriber. It means what it says. You can listen to Rush 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and more, because if you go and subscribe now, you'll get an extra 4 weeks of Rush 24/7 free. That's basically 56 weeks for the price of 52. Rush 24/7 56 for the price of Rush 24/7 52. You can hear him 24 hours a day. You can read him 24 hours a day. They got all the transcripts from each day's show on there. You can watch him on the Ditto Cam. You can go back through the archive and say, what was Rush's show like on this day 10 years ago? You can listen to Rush, you can watch Rush, you can enjoy Rush in any medium now known to exist, simply by becoming a Rush 24/7 subscriber. If you've been to the website lately, you'll know the website is all singing, all dancing now. It's all been jazzed up. It's super groovy. But that applies to your Rush 24/7 subscription too. There's all these little itsy-bitsy Rush extras, so you can have EIB wallpaper on your iPhone. There's a whole ton of great stuff there. All you got to do is go to rushlimbaugh.com and become a Rush 24/7 subscriber. Mr. Snerdley departed early for the airport. He's got a flight to catch. I think it was that Festival of the Steel Phallus in Japan. For some reason, he needed to get on a plane to Tokyo and get there and see what the Japanese brides riding through the streets straddling a giant steel phallus. I mean, you know, you can't get that in Palm Beach, can you? Anyway, so he's on his way to the airport. Ali is running things in New York. I've got actually a sick dog with me here at Ice Station EIB. And so if the dog needs to go to the vet, this dog is important to me. The very first show I did from Ice Station EIB, which I believe was over 6 years ago now, this dog was present with me in the studio then. So if I duck out, it's because if there's suddenly dead air, it's because I've had to take my ailing dog to the vet. But don't worry, Ali is covering for Mr. Snerdley down in New York, and Ali will be happy to guest host the show for the final half hour too. She's eager to do it, so it all depends how it's going to go with my sick dog here. And this is a story that came out a couple of days ago, but when you hear about, I wanted to mention it because it's one of the things that I hope President Trump consciously decides he's going to reverse. Because when you hear about stories like Middlebury College, you think these colleges or all the safe space, the microaggressions, the trigger warnings, you think they're all just like at these sort of effete little colleges where these, the most pampered generation in history has to be cosseted and coddled and cuddled because God forbid, somebody should actually expose them to an non-approved thought. And you think this is something that just goes on at these, as I said, these effete, decadent colleges that, God willing, are in their death throes. But what's disturbing to me is that it's actually happening at what you might call institutions of manliness, of the manly virtues. The United States Air Force has warned the troops not to use words like boy or girl because they are offensive. Words like boy or girl are offensive, as well as such phrases as blondes have more fun. Blondes certainly don't have more fun if they're around the guys who drew up this list. The list also contains words such as colonial and blacklist. Blacklist is apparently they've drawn up a blacklist of words that you can't say. They put 10 words on the blacklist, but you can't call it a blacklist because blacklist is one of the words. And you can't use the word colonial because it's offensive. So you can't say, oh, I was in Bermuda last weekend. Now there's a colonial paradise. Really, for colonial paradise, I'd much rather weekend in the Turks and Caicos Islands. You can't say that in the United States Air Force. The United States Air Force, if they decide to bomb Bermuda, isn't going to say, we begin bombing the colonial target at 0400 hours. That would be offensive to the people of Bermuda as they're bombed. Here's the list from the United States Air Force. 1, words and phrases you can't say in the United States Air Force. The email was written by a senior Air Force leader and sent to troops at Lackland Air Force Base. 1, boy. 2, girl. 3, you people. 4, colonial. 5, blacklist. 6, black male. 7, black ball. You can't use the word blackmail and you can't use the word blackball. If I hear you, if you're a U.S. airman and I hear you using the word blackmail, I'll blackmail you into telling the guy that you use the word blackmail. 5, blacklist. 6, blackmail. 7, blackball. Basically, don't use any word with black in it. Don't say the word black. Don't even think the word black. You don't say black and white. Don't say black and white. 8, sounds Greek to me. You can't say sounds Greek to me because it is offensive to the people of Greece. So you can't say blacklist, blackmail, blackball. They could have gone on with that. Don't say Black Lives Matter, by the way. That could be extremely offensive. Don't say that, because don't use any phrase with black in it. 8 sounds Greek to me, even if it does sound Greek to you. Even if you're listening to the radio and some sinister foreign guest host says hopistos doulo estin entopotamo idou authis hothasa boulos ten teknen epitake nutai kai epiten kephalen histamenos, and you say, oh, that sounds Greek to me. Don't say that, because it's racist. Blondes have more fun. Not in the United States Air Force. And 10, too many chiefs, not enough Indians. How do you know you've got too many chiefs and not enough Indians? When there are senior officers in the United States Air Force who have nothing better to do with their time than draw up lists of forbidden phrases to send to the personnel of the United States Air Force. That's how you know you've got, in the United States Air Force, they have too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Otherwise, they would not have senior officers with enough time on their hands to draw up lists like this. And I mentioned, I was rather rude about Snoop Dogg, or Snoop Doggy Dogg, as I still fondly think of him. Snoop Dogg the other day, because he's made this video where he shoots a clown version of Donald Trump, but when he pulls the gun, a flag comes out and just says bang. And I was saying it's come to something when a gangster rapper isn't as hardcore as rampaging snowflakes at Middlebury College, because they didn't just pull out a gun that has a flag that goes bang. They actually beat the crap out of a middle-aged woman, left-wing professor, and sent her to the emergency room. That's how hardcore the rampaging snowflakes. So we live in an insane world where the wispy-bearded, man-bunned snowflake is actually harder core than Snoop Dogg. And we now have a situation where the United States Air Force is now more politically correct than Middlebury College. And it doesn't matter. You know, this is important to the left. That's why they want to hollow out essentially male institutions. That's why when you read a story about transgendered Boy Scouts, the first in New Jersey the other day, the first transgender Boy Scouts, a 9-year-old girl whose mother has decided that the 9-year-old girl is in fact a boy. And as her 9-year-old girl is now a boy, she insisted that her 9-year-old girl transgender boy be allowed to join the Boy Scouts. And the Boy Scouts caved. And these are the victories that matter to the left. They don't care whether there's a transgendered newsreader at NPR. They don't care whether there's a transgendered professor at Middlebury College. It's more important to them to hollow out the bastions of the manly virtues like the Boy Scouts and the military. And the diversity madness. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago with Elaine Donnelly. Google her while you're Googling Goggle. Google, and then Goggle Elaine Donnelly, because she does a lot about this on the feminization of the military. I reserve the right to say boy and girl and you people and colonial and blacklist, blackmail, blackball. Sounds Greek to me. Blondes have more fun. Too many chiefs and not enough Indians. I'm not listening to word banners. I'm not listening to phrase banners. And I intend to see if I can't get through all of these phrases by the end of the show. So keep listening, boys and girls. Stay tuned, you people. I know that you rebel Americans are former colonials, but I'm not going to put you on the blacklist over it. I'm not going to blackball you. Frankly, a lot of this, you rebel colonials, sound Greek to me, but I do like the chicks. Blondes have more fun, undoubtedly. But You know there are too many chiefs and not enough Indians when a serious military fighting force has got time to waste on this. The hollowing out of male institutions in America is a prime goal of the left, and Trump should resist it every step of the way. Mark Stein for Rush. More to come. Hey, Mark Stein in for Rush. Let's go to Michael in Atlanta, Georgia. Michael, you're live on America's #1 radio show. What's on your mind today?
Awesome, man. Thanks for taking my call. I just want to say that the tenets of what created the KKK back in the 50s and 60s, they're still alive and well today with the Democrat Party, except now they're not having to wear sheets. They hide behind names like Black Lives Matters. I mean, the threatening, the burning, the harming of other people simply because, not based on race, but because we disagree.
Right.
If that's not the KKK of today, I don't know what is. So you're looking for a new label because you don't want to use liberal Democrats. They should be called the KKK Democrats.
Well, you're right that this is from the left. That the Democrats were the ones who organized the Ku Klux Klan. The Democrats were the members of the Klan until well into living memory, as we know when Bill Clinton eulogized Robert C. Byrd as the big Kleagle of the Ku Klux Klan a couple of years ago at his funeral. And you're right too, Michael, in that none of this is actually particularly about principle or about philosophy. It's about power. It's about raw power and raw violence. And so the people who were the Klansmen guys who were once white supremacists, what's the part of that they like in the end? What's the part of that that really turns them on? Is it being white or is it being supremacist? It's the supremacist bit they like. So they're quite happy to go from, the Democrat Party is quite happy to go from, in 2 generations, from being white supremacists to being transgender supremacists, because it's the supremacist bit that's appealing to them. And that's what it is. It's a change in fashion. That's essentially what's happened. But the naked, raw thuggery that you see now, it has a long, deep, dark history in the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party, is the biggest institution that supported 19th century slavery, is the only institution that supported 19th century slavery that is still in business to this day, which I find amazing. You know, after Nelson Mandela was released from prison and everything changed in South Africa, the National Party, which was the party that had imposed apartheid on the country, basically went out of business because it was a toxic label, and I forget what they're called now, but they basically turned themselves into a kind of slightly fluffy sounding name and then merged with somebody else and then became something else because it was a toxic brand. The Democrat Party was the biggest slave supporting institution on the planet for 100 years, and it's still in business, and it's incredible. And all we've seen is that actually that fashions have changed. So that instead of them saying, "Oh, let's get together and light a cross on some guy's lawn," they now say, "Hey, let's all get together on Saturday night and beat the crap out of a woman at Middlebury College and put her in hospital." It's a change in fashion. That's a very good point, Michael. The temptation to violence, and it's one way. It's one way. Alan Combs died, and I did something about Alan Combs. He was the left-wing guy at Fox News, and I co-hosted with him, and I liked Alan enormously, even though he was left-wing. And some right-wing people said, well, I never had any use for Alan Combs, and all the rest of it, but I'm sorry you lost your friend or whatever. And that was fine. That was fine. This guy I mentioned in Australia, the minute a left-wing guy says something nice about a right-wing guy, he gets smashed into the ground, and he's forced to delete his tweet. That's the difference. I try to be ecumenical about this stuff, but this violence, intolerance, this totalitarian thought enforcement comes only from one side, and it's the left side. When you're beating up middle-aged women, You're the fascist, baby. You're the fascist. More to come. Alan Mora tweets, did the Air Force also ban the phrase transatlantic flight? Yes, they did. That is totally transphobic. If you're transitioning and you're in the Air Force, you should have the right to choose whichever flight you want. If you want to use the transatlantic flight, fine. If you want to use the trans-Pacific flight, fine. It should be, if you want to use the trans-Indian Ocean, no, wait a minute, the trans-Native American Ocean flight, that is also fine. Whichever flight you prefer to use. I would like to thank Mr. Snerdley, who has fled the country, and Ali, who's covering for Mr. Snerdley, and Mike. This has been Mark Stein, your undocumented anchorman, honoured to be sitting behind the golden EIB microphone. The indispensable man of American conservatism, Rush, returns live tomorrow on the EIB network. Don't miss it.
Welcome.